Jordan, Jesus and Jordan. Like many of you, for 5 straight weeks, I was glued to my television watching The Last Dance. And it sparked a firestorm of conversations in both athletic and non-athletic arenas. It sparked a firestorm of conversations in both secular and sacred spaces. Conversations around personal drive, winning, leadership, relationships, and so much more. And like many of you, I certainly engaged in my fair share of conversations in public spaces and in private circles. Objectively, and sometimes not so objectively. If I'm being quite honest, sometimes highly critical and opinionated. But here is what has proven to be true in this docuseries that over 6 million watched. It was entertaining, engaging, enlightening, and even educational on some level. And I started thinking about what was happening between the years of 1993 and 1998. And I remembered this, Adrian. I remember that Clinton was a 2-term president. We had 3 major bombings in the U.S. The World Trade, the Olympic Village in Atlanta, and Oklahoma City. The Desert Storm War and the collapse of the Soviet Union. The funds for human cloning were banned. And many of you will like this one. The World Wide Web was launched publicly. And while all this was going on, while all this was taking place, Jordan and the Bulls won 6 championships. And it occurred to me that when you are single-minded with purpose and intent, you can produce the right results. It occurred to me that regardless of what is going on around you, when you are single-mindedly filled with purpose and intent, you typically produce the right results. I feel like I'm about to heat up. That is pushing me in the direction of our text this morning. In John chapter 5, the scene has been set in Jerusalem. But when chapter 6 opens up, the setting of the scene is in the Sea of Galilee, 100 miles north of their original starting point. And here's what captured my attention as I was reading this text. Here's what grabbed me as I was reading verse 37 and verse 38. Here's what I watched and witnessed. I witnessed the level of audacity and boldness when I read verse 38. Check out what Jesus said. Jesus said in verse 38, I have come down to do the will of God who sent me, not my own. Maybe you missed that. I have come down to do the will of God who sent me and not my own. While Rome was expanding their brand of culture, while the pantheon of Caesars were cementing their names in history, Jesus says, I came to do one thing and one thing only. Listen, as I press the gas on the pedal of this message. I just stopped by to tell somebody in this virtual space that when you are focused on your God-inspired and your God-sanctioned assignment, you typically will produce God-ordained results. Ooh, let me back up and give you that one more time. When you are focused on your God-inspired and your God-sanctioned assignment, you will produce God-ordained results. Hear me, beloved. Hear me say this to you, church. No matter what's going on around us, and I know there is a whole lot going on around us right now, and I don't want to act like it isn't, but no matter what is going on around us, can I say to you, stay faithful to God's will and God's why. Because if you stay faithful to God's will and to God's why, God will reveal his how to make it happen. Ooh, if you stay focused on God's will and God's why, God will reveal his how to you. Listen, I'm about to wrap this thing up, but before I make my exit, before I put this sermon into park, I believe that Jesus teaches us a few things in this text. I believe that Jesus says a few things to us in this text. Can I share it with you? I believe that Jesus says to us in this text that while we are focused on God-inspired and God-sanctioned things, the kind of results that we produce will be pleasing in his sight. Ooh, I just gave you some real good. Jesus teaches us that when we understand our God-inspired reasons, check out verse 38. When we understand our God-inspired reasons, is what it does. It keeps us focused and it raises our faith game. When we understand our God-inspired reasons, it keeps us focused and it raises up our faith game. When you understand your why, it's hard to get distracted by anyhow. When you understand what you've been called to do, it's hard to get sidetracked. When you are dialed into your God-inspired and your God-sanctioned idea, when you understand what your unique and specific assignment in life is, it's hard to get distracted by anything else. I talked about Jesus and Jordan because you can't win 6 straight championships or pause for 1 year without having a level of focus, without having a level of inspiration. Jesus, check this out. Jesus tells us that when you're focused on your will and your why, you can do almost anything because God will bring about his how. Check it out. Your faith game is raised. If you look at the text, Jesus fed 5,000. He healed sick. And he walked on water all before he made this statement. Go read your Bible. Before we get to verse 38, we find out that Jesus has walked on water. We found out that Jesus had fed 5,000. We find out that Jesus has healed. Did I say it to you already? When you are focused on your God-inspired why, when you are focused on your God-inspired reason, your faith game is up. Yeah, come on. I need to say that to somebody this morning because with all that is going on around us and with all that is going on inside of many of us, we've gotten distracted from what God has already placed inside of us. We have lost sight of who God has called us to be. We have lost sight of our God-inspired gifts, talents, and abilities. We've gotten distracted from what God has uniquely built us to be. The Bible suggests to us that before we were formed in our mother's womb, God had already knew us. And so it suggests to us that before you actually hit the earth, you were already in the mind of God. And God doesn't do anything by accident or happenstance. He is an organized and a planned God. And so your existence is not by accident. Your existence is not some result of somebody made a mistake. No, your existence is intentional. And the moment you tap into your intentionality, the moment you tap into your inspiration, the moment you tap into your God-ordained reason, the moment you go back and revisit what chapter 38 means, he said, I have come to do the will of God, and that's it. That's it. I don't care what's going on around me. I am uniquely linked into what God has called me to do. Do you have that level of focus this morning? Are you that aligned with who God has called you to be?
Come on now.
Have you tapped into your unique wiring? Are you learning about what God has gifted you to do? Are you wasting your inertia trying to be something that you are not? Are you trying to figure out what the next man is doing or the next sister is doing? Are you trying to carve your personality and your temperament, your style and your flair around somebody else's gifting and talent? Or are you locked in on that thing? That one thing that God has given you to do, not those things, but that one thing. I read recently that priority in its original intent, when it was introduced into the lexicon, did not have a plural meaning. There was no such thing as priority. Priority suggests that there's only one thing that can be important. And I'm asking you, what is that for you? Perhaps you got too many priorities and you can't focus on your God priority. You can't focus on that one thing that you were born to do and died to do. You can't give that any attention because you got too many priorities. Jesus shows us that there is benefits when you lock in. Jesus shows us that there are benefits when you are focused. Jesus shows us there are benefits when you understand your reason and your why. Jordan shows us what happens when you eliminate distractions. Jordan shows us what happens when you narrow in on something and you block out the rest of everything else. Jordan shows us what happens when you are committed to something and you are dedicated to seeing it come to fruition. Can I suggest to you this morning, stop being so holy that you can't glean examples from culture. Stop being so Bible thumping that you can't connect with lessons that the world has to teach you. I've watched 5 weeks of this Last Dance, and one of the things that I gleaned is that, man, when you lock in, when you load up, and you eliminate distractions, you can do almost anything. Can I say to somebody this morning, you can do what God has called you to do. You can be what God has called you to be. You can walk in those places and those spaces that have already been preordained for you. Your voice will have influence. Your voice will carry weight. Your presence will open up doors. Your presence will give life and healing if you are willing to be committed to who God has called you to be. If you're willing to be committed to the things that God has placed in your hand. If you're willing to be committed and faithful over the few things that God has given you so that he would make you a ruler over much. If you're willing to be faithful, you can do like Jesus. Can you imagine doing something in 3 years that will have impact for 3,000 to 5,000? Last I checked, Jesus only lived to be 33. He started his public ministry at 30. And so in 3 years, with 120 disciples, 12 apostles, and 3 dudes who became a part of his inner circle, we are still feasting on his teachings almost 4,000 years later. What happens, man, when you tune in? What happens when you put your seatbelt of focus on? What happens when you put your pedal on the gas and you are dialed in to that thing that God has uniquely called you to do? Can you imagine the kind of influence that you could have? Jesus says on one occasion, marvel not. Marvel not at the things that I do, for greater things than this shall you do. What did he do? Raise the dead. What did he do? Give sight to the blind. What did he do? Heal those who were sick. What did he do? Walk on water. What did he do? Be raised from the dead. He said, marvel not at the things that I have done, for greater things than these shall you do. What can you do? Look at that family member beside you and ask them with confidence and a level of audacity. Make them uncomfortable and ask them, what can you do? If you're in a house by yourself, I'm giving you permission to go ahead and talk to yourself. Ask yourself this morning, what can I do? What lessons can I learn from the spiritual and the sacred and the secular? What lessons can I learn from Christ and from culture? What things can I learn from what is holy and what is human? What lessons can I learn from he who was fully God and fully human? What lessons can I learn when the divine meets flesh? What instructions can I gain that will help me walk this thing that you have called me to do and to be?
Thank you, Lord.
Jordan, Jesus, and Jordan. I need somebody to hear this morning, because as things begin to open back up and society begins to look like some semblance of what we considered normal before, I need you prepared and ready to walk out with a level of boldness and audacity perhaps that you did not have before. I need you to start tapping into the things that God has already given you. I need you to start becoming unafraid of the spaces that you are supposed to be walking in. I need you to begin to say the things that you know are in your heart and in your mind. I need you to go ahead and go back to school. You ain't got but a few more classes left. I need you to go ahead and finish. I need you to go ahead and start writing that book or whatever that thing is that you're supposed to be writing. I need you to go ahead and start putting the plans together for that business or that organization. I need you to go ahead and figure out how to have a unique, specific, and intentional and loving conversation with your spouse and with your children. I need you to go ahead and do those things that you know you can do and that you're supposed to be doing. I need you to lock in. Come on, look at me. I need you to lock in. I need you to focus on what is really important. Come on, pause. Rewind. Let me give it to you again. I need you to focus on what's really important. Because when you focus on what's really important, from the Jesus perspective, it impacts and blesses everybody else around you. There it is, Jesus and Jordan.
You got it.
Jordan won 6. Jesus won eternity. Jordan got 6 rings. Jesus says in a few verses before we get to 37 and 38, or right after 38, that I have not lost any of those whom he sent to me. Jesus got 6 and ain't never. Jordan got 6 and ain't never lost. Jesus ain't never lost. He said, I have not lost not one of those who you've given to me. Yeah. Jesus and Jordan, both champions, both winners, both highly focused, both inspired, both recognizing what they've been sanctioned to do. Jesus and Jordan, one was winning on a basketball court, the other one was winning in the human heart.
You got it. Come on.
Jesus and Jordan. Yeah. Go ahead and replace Jordan's name with yours. Jesus and Keith. Jesus and Allende. Jesus and Dion. Jesus and Dara. Jesus and Omari. Jesus and Asante. Jesus and Randy. Jesus and Simone. Jesus and RJ. Jesus and Kim. Jesus and Doug. Jesus and Tiana. Jesus and Neville. Jesus and Cynthia. Jesus and Sophia. Jesus and Cole. Jesus and Sarah. Jesus and Steve Rogers. Go ahead and put your name in that space. Jesus and. Because when you recognize that and has power, that there's strength in that and, that there's calling in that and, that there's unique anointing in that and, you begin to walk into spaces that may make others uncomfortable, but serve as a blessing to someone else. Can I say to you this morning, as I put this message and this conversation in part, God desires for you to walk fully in who you were uniquely designed to be. Don't try to be like anyone else. You can't be them. You can only be who God